He's imposing sweeping tariffs on around 60 countries and insisting that this will make America wealthy again. Dr. Victor Davis Hanson is a senior fellow at the Hoover Institution and Stanford University and best-selling author and historian, and he joins us now on Power Hour. Dr. Victor Davis Hanson, thank you for your time. Look, countries around the world are in shock. This is no doubt a big controversial move from Donald Trump. Is he making the right decision?
Well, he's making one that the elite of the United States does not approve of, but the majority of people do. And it's because we're running about a $1.1 trillion to $1.4 trillion on average the last 5 years trade deficit. We're $37 trillion in national debt. We pay $3 billion a day in interest on it. We're running a 1.7 annual trillion dollar budget deficit. So everybody's passed on this debt and this imbalance and this asymmetry, and he's decided he's going to be the first president that's going to address all of these issues at once. So we'll see what happens. It's not sustainable, what everyone feels about it.
Okay, so is Trump playing the long game here? Do you think Americans will be okay with some short-term pain, and how long will it take for Americans to actually benefit from these moves?
I think most countries, I think his idea is no tariffs at all. So countries that don't have tariffs are us are in surpluses, with one exception. If there are restrictions on American products, he feels that certain countries, and this applies to Australia. We had one case of a bovine encephalitis, I think 22 years ago, and that was imported from Canada, that cow. And Australia has banned beef from America ever since. So I think that explains why he put the 10% on Australia. But you got to remember that Australia, in all of the polls, Gallup and Pew polls, overwhelmingly polls the most favored nation among the American people. I think 64% of Americans have a high opinion of Australia. So I don't think this is going to be a big I don't think it's going to be a big issue. It's going to be resolved. He said he wasn't going to put a tariff on beef. And I think Australia runs a slight surplus, 15 billion with us, and your country runs a surplus with all countries combined. So you're not in the same situation that we are with this massive deficit.
We are seeing other countries respond. Just 24 hours prior to Donald Trump's announcement, Israel announced that it's lifting all tariffs being imposed on US products. Do you expect that other countries will follow suit and respond in a similar way?
I think some was. I think he's the art of the deal talking. By that, I mean, so Mexico was supposed to be a free trade partner. They have a $177 billion deficit with us, trade. They have $63 billion. They're expatriates, most of them here illegally, send to Mexico. Most of them are being subsidized with U.S. health, welfare, housing, education subsidies while they're here. And their cartels drain $30 billion. So it's all building up with all these countries. In their case, I think if a country has a large surplus and they have asymmetrical tariffs, he's not going to back down. If a country says, we have a moderate surplus and we're willing to work with you, and we don't need to eliminate it, but we're willing to work with you where we have no tariffs on either side. The United States has the fewest aggregate across the board, has the lowest tariffs of any major country in the world.
Yeah,
that's just a fact. And we have the most open, and he's the first person to come along and says, we have hollowed out the interior of the country and we're not going to do it anymore, because I think it's mostly directed at the $200 billion trade deficit with Europe, the 177 with Mexico, the 63 billion with Canada, and especially the 250 billion with China.
You mentioned Europe. Just this week, Donald Trump told Keir Starmer there's no trade deal without freedom of speech for British citizens. Is this Donald Trump's place?
I don't know. I mean, Donald Trump has a special, I don't know what it is. He has a kindred feeling with the Anglo-speaking world, Australia, even Canada and the UK. But The problem he's having with the UK and Europe in general is if they run trade surpluses or deficits, and if they haven't met their 2%, I think Britain has now finally met their 2% promise of European NATO countries to invest in military, then he feels that the United States is subsidizing their defense while they are taking advantages of trade. And the weird thing about Donald Trump is he seems to be able to get along with people of with the exception of Justin Trudeau, he's able to get along with people of the opposite political party abroad in a way that's I can't explain it, but sometimes he's closer to somebody on the left abroad than he is his kindred conservative. Not all, but it's odd. I haven't seen a president be quite like that.
Let's talk about the Russia-Ukraine war. Trump's obviously vowed to end the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. It's not an easy task. The Times is reporting that Russia won't be accepting the White House's proposal to end the war while Zelensky is in power. How can peace be achieved? Should we see Zelensky resign? Is Trump being too trusting of Putin? What's your assessment?
Well, Trump's already reacted to that, and he has threatened Putin with really the harshest sanctions that even the Europeans had never considered, and that would be an oil embargo on all countries, a complete trade embargo on all countries that buy Russian oil. And by the way, that would include some European countries that are very critical of the United States, but they still buy Russian oil and gas through third parties. So what he's doing is he's saying that every time that I slap down Zelensky and say you have to negotiate, then Russia gets emboldened. And every time Russia gets emboldened, I slap them down, and then Zelensky gets emboldened. But we're working toward a consensus, and I think everybody in Europe, the United States, everybody knows what the consensus is, that Russia will probably keep the Crimea and Donbass they stole during the Obama administration. They won't be in NATO, but they will be armed to the teeth. There'll be a DMZ, a commercial tripwire zone. And then the only outstanding issue is how far can you push Vladimir Putin back to his embarkation point on February 24th of 2022. But I think the pieces are all there. But we've got to remember, this is the worst battle since Stalingrad in World War II. There's been about 1.3 million dead, wounded, missing, sick, and killed. And it's senseless. And no one has stepped up and said, I want to do something to stop it. And our position in the United States had been, quote unquote, do whatever it takes. Well, that was just feeding a psalm or a Verdun.
Putin has ordered the largest recruitment of young men since 2011. 160,000 men are going to be called up for military service by July. Now, officials within the Russian military claim that the recruits won't be sent to fight in Ukraine. But what do you make of it? What should we make of these reports out of Russia?
He's doing that so he thinks that he can get concessions, and I don't think he's going to get them. One thing that we should remember is that he left his borders during 3 administrations. He invaded Ossetia and Georgia during the George W. Bush lame duck administration. He invaded Donbass and Crimea during the Obama administration, 2014, and he invaded and tried to take Kiev during the Biden. He did not move in the 4 years that Trump was here. And remember that we killed more Russians in Syria, 400 of the Wagner Group, than we did the entire Cold War. We got out of a missile deal. We sanctioned them. We begged the Germans not to do Nord Stream 2 pipeline. That was the only administration that sold offensive weapons that had been canceled by Obama and put on hold by Biden to Ukraine. So Putin knows that he has a record, Trump, of being unpredictable and has been tough on him. And that kind of belies the conventional wisdom or criticism in Europe that Donald Trump is Putin's puppy. What happens is he's going back and forth, but the principal deal making is, I think everybody left and right, Europe, America, everybody knows what it is. It's just a matter of positioning the boundaries and et cetera. But I think they will get a deal this year sometime, I hope.
I hope so as well. Look, Donald Trump, he's been in office for more than 70 days. He's approaching his first 100 days of his second term. What's your assessment of how he's been performing? We've seen the border essentially close. We've seen more oil being produced. How significant is it? I know there are plenty of Trump critics out there. What do you make of what he's been able to achieve in just 73 days?
Well, I think we're all surprised that it's a counter revolution. In magnitude, we haven't seen anything like it since the left-wing revolution of FDR in 1933. But it's a counter revolution. It's economic, political, cultural, military, everything is up for grabs. And there's been radical changes, and the Democratic Party has kind of melted in Congress. They've taken to the street. They've gone after Tesla, but they're disorganized. They're polling about 23% now in popularity. So the only challenge he has is the messaging. I think some of his people get a little bit braggadocious or triumphalist. He needs to say, look, we didn't run up the debt, and we didn't open the border, and we didn't create a 1.1 trade deficit, but we're here at this time in this place, and we don't like what we're doing. We don't like to get in arguments with our allies. We don't like to lay off federal workers. It's much easier to borrow and spend than cut and save, but we have no choice because it's sustainable what we're doing in the United States. And if he gets that kind of tragic, this is the task that fell to us. We didn't want it, but we're going to do it. I think it's a much better than, hey, high five, we got a chainsaw, we're going to get rid of these fraud, waste, and abuse stuff. That's all. It's just a matter of messaging.
What do you make of the way Doge is being run with Elon? We've seen those attacks. People are protesting against Elon Musk. Is it a good thing for America, or is he just too aggressive?
Oh, it's a good thing. He had a very good, valuable interview with Brett Barrett. He's been caricatured having a bunch of nerds from Silicon Valley. They're not. These people are CEOs. They're entrepreneurs. They're in their 40s, 50s, and they have gone through the federal government, and they're finding things that people cannot believe. And they've already identified $100 billion in waste, fraud, and abuse. They think they can get up to $500 billion to a trillion. Nobody is disputing that. The left is not saying to us, well, that's wrong, or this, we shouldn't do this. And nor is anybody saying to them, yes, we can't borrow 1.7 trillion a year and pay $3 billion a day and have more interest payments than our defense budget. And therefore, I have this counter agenda that will do the same thing as Doge, but I feel that it'll be more effective or more compact. There's nothing. There's no counter. So you can see that they're afraid of him because what he's doing has to be done. And they're angry about the methodology, but they don't have a counter proposal. And they know they can't continue as we are, or we're going to go broke. We're already panicking the bond market. So it has to be done. But and they don't have an alternative to it yet.
You mentioned just how poorly the Democrats are polling at the moment. What does the future of the Democratic Party look like? We've just seen the Democrats become so irrelevant. Here they are attacking Doge. There are some Democrats out on the streets torching Teslas. We've seen in the election campaign last year, prominent Americans who belong to the Democrat Party just abandon the Democrat Party altogether and support Donald Trump. I mean, what's the future for the Dems?
Well, they've been there before. After the Carter debacle of 1980, we had 12 years of Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush, and then they got smart and said, we've got to go to the center. And then whether you like Bill Clinton or not, or whether he was sincere in his centrism, he did balance the budget. It's the last time a person did it. And he fought crime, and he closed the border. And the Democratic Party was in power for 8 years, and then with the interregnum of George W. Bush, they still won the popular vote when Bush was elected in 2000. And then they had Obama. Then they moved hard left under Obama, and they went further and further left. And they're either going to have to go back to the Clinton remedy and go to the center. John Fetterman is kind of an example, or they're going to be completely irrelevant. I don't know if they're going to survive, but they're not unlike some of the parties in Europe on the left. We have a conservative, worldwide, global reaction to this hard left, progressive, socialist 20 years. And in the United States, they went after, they used lawfare. And now we're seeing the Europeans adopt the American left by going after politicians in Romania and France, Germany, and they don't have a constructive agenda, is what I'm trying to say, that'll appeal to 51% of the people.
No, they certainly don't. They've got a few years to get it together. I noticed that Gavin Newsom's hosting a new podcast, trying to interview guests on the other side, trying to appear more centre. Are you buying it?
No, I don't think anybody. I'm a sixth-generation Californian, so I know the whole Bay Area politics very well. What Jerry Brown or Nancy Pelosi or Dianne Feinstein or any of them were like. But everything that he's saying now, he's criticizing himself. He might as well talk to a mirror, because he's the one that he blows up dams when he's supposed to build them. He gave $500 million to illegal aliens during COVID. He created a slush fund to sue Donald Trump. He's given Medi-Cal, that's free health care, to illegal aliens, where it's broke. It's $8 billion in the hole. A quarter of all Californians are defaulting on their power bills, because it's 40 cents a kilowatt, the highest in the United States, highest taxes in the country, highest gas taxes, and among the worst infrastructure, the highest poverty rates, 21%, largest number of illegal aliens. 27% of the population was not born in California, and that demanded assimilation, integration, acculturation. And what did he do? It was all diversity, equity, inclusion, separatism. So he helped create this. In fact, he's the architect of most of California's failure, because he was not only governor, he was lieutenant governor, and then he was mayor of San Francisco, and then he was on the city council. He's got 30 years of fingerprints all over this disaster.
Yeah, well said. And just looking at his track record, it is not good. Finally, Dr. Victor Davis Hanson, we assessed Trump's performance over the past 73 days, but looking ahead, if he is able to pull off some of the key promises, which he's starting to, will America be better off? How do you see America in the next few years?
Well, he's got 4 or 5 initiatives that are very risky and controversial, but if he were to pull them off, he would go down as I think, the most successful president in 50 years. And those are, can he denuclearize Iran without blowing up the Middle East? Can he solve the Ukraine war? Can he get us on a trajectory in 2 or 3 years to a balanced budget? Can he rebuild the U.S. military? And can he, I think it's very important, get within $150 billion of a trade parity, so we're not running these huge deficits. If he can do that, and he's working on all of them, and they're gaining enormous resistance and anger, but they have to be done. And if he can pull it off, it'll be something. We've never seen anybody this ambitious, is what I'm trying to say.
Absolutely.